Zachrenu l'chaim. Remember us for life. If you look out through the machzor, you're going to notice that very often we just pray for life. It seems a little odd, perhaps a bit of a floor, if you will. Why not set the bar a little bit higher? Why not look for something grander than just life? And I think part of it is that for most of our history, life wasn't a given. It's only within the past 200 years that we've conquered infant mortality. Life expectancy has grown in almost every year of our lifetimes. So we now take life for granted. But Jewish tradition understands that life is precious. And this year we have certainly come to appreciate just how fragile and precious life can be. But I want to take a bit of a deeper dive into the definition of life. And I was intrigued by a definition given by the father of experimental medicine and also one of the fathers of modern physiology, Claude Bernard. Up until Bernard, everyone assumed that life was the accommodation of the environment around you. Life is accommodating environment. Let me explain to you, though, what life accommodating environment means. Life accommodating environment is the gazelle accommodating the lion, running just a little bit slower so that the lion has a chance to catch up. And so the gazelle accommodating the external environment is the gazelle becoming lunch for the lion. And then, after the lion is finished, then the hyenas will come. And the gazelle's life will then accommodate the hyenas. And then it will accommodate the vultures, and then it will accommodate the microbes, and then it will become fertilizer, and then the gazelle will accommodate the grass. That's life accommodating the external environment. Bernard said, life is something entirely different. Life is stability of the internal environment against the external. It's when the gazelle outruns the lion and never even meets the hyenas. It's when the gazelle eats the grass rather than fertilizing it. You may never have heard of Bernard or his revolutionary idea about life, but you probably did hear it in its summary term. Homeostasis, keeping stability. The internal stability of your organs, of your body chemistry, is homeostasis. And for the past 6 months, all of us have been engaged in extraordinary acrobatics to preserve our homeostasis. We have stayed home, we have stopped going to parties, we have stopped going to synagogues, we have stopped eating out at restaurants, we have done all sorts of things. Stopped going to school, stopped going to university. We have created our own little bubbles to preserve our homeostasis. Because we need our lives to be preserved against a very threatening external environment. But there's another organism that I want to look at, and that organism is the Jewish community, and how the Jewish community survives as a unit accommodating an external environment. And the truth of the matter is, I have never been more worried about how a community reacts to a changing environment. It's not all bad news. Judaism started as a religion built to accommodate different environments. Follow me with this story. Moses goes up the mountain, gets a set of tablets, gets a Torah, comes down, teaches it to people, comes to the edge of the Jordan River, and he describes a land that is going to be an entire society that's going to have rules about cities and kings and judges and crops and tithes and plantings and all sorts of rules. Moshe is going to give everyone on the edge of the Jordan River. Moses is never going to cross that river. Moses will not plant a seed. He will not walk through a city. He will not sit on a court. He will not set foot into the land of Israel. Moses is going to have to give people a system that allows them to jump the Jordan River. Moses is going to create a package, a system of living which he will himself never occupy. It is only for those people who are crossing into a new reality. Unless you make light of this new reality, let's just imagine it from the perspective of someone who experienced it. First, they were all together slaves in Egypt. Then they crossed the Red Sea together. They were together at the foot of Sinai. They were together in a journey of 40 years, tent next to tent, drawing from the same well, collecting the same manna, person next to person, tent next to tent, close proximity, close-knit community. They all move together. They camp together. And as soon as they cross that Jordan, one's going to go up to Dan near Kiryat Shmona in the north, and another one's going to become a farmer in Beersheba. One's going to be a mariner in Haifa, while another one is a farmer in Tel Aviv. This is a radical change from a close-knit community to a distant community. And not only that, the package that Moshe delivered, this Torah that jumps the Jordan, survives in almost every context you can imagine. It survives in the context of the land of Israel. It survives the Babylonian exile. It survives the Roman exile. It occupies a beautiful space in Ostia Antica, in the Roman Empire, in Alexandria, in the Greek Empire. It will go to Babylon, and it will go to Latvia, Lithuania, Australia, Alaska, South Africa, Buenos Aires, Shanghai, Kobe, Japan. Judaism has thrived under both cross and crescent. It has survived freedom and oppression. It has survived Nazis and Cossacks. It has survived everywhere. It has even flourished in Antarctica. Yes, there is Jewish practice at the research mission in Antarctica. 7 continents, 3,500 years. So what's the secret sauce? What allows Judaism to maintain its homeostasis over all those different scenarios? If you ask me, it's simple. Talmud describes the portable homeland of the Jewish people as the Daled Amot of Halacha, the 4 cubits of Jewish law. It's the little details. Just little things. You know, pennies in the pushka before Shabbat, our hypersensitivity to chametz on Pesach, the diligence to light candles every Friday night, the myriad of little minutiae that protect us and help us keep the Shabbat. Judaism is nothing if not seeing the infinite in the infinitesimal. It is the little details, the things that we must do, that we are careful to do year in, year out, day in and day out, that keep the Jew connected over, again, 3,500 years and 7 continents. Before you dismiss this idea of the power of small details, I want to tell you of a story that I heard this past summer. It's told by James Clear in his book Atomic Habits. And he tells us about British cycling. British cycling was notoriously bad. They had won 1 Tour de France in 100 years and 1 gold medal in the Olympics. But they were so bad that bike manufacturers refused to sell to British riders for fear that the appearance of a British rider on their brand would hurt market share. So they were pretty bad. Then came Dave Brailsford, new coach, and he implemented the strategy of the aggregation of marginal gains. What's the aggregation of marginal gains? It's just being 1% better in a whole bunch of categories. Brailsford wanted a 1% better seat. He wanted a 1% better massage gel. He wanted a 1% better uniform. He wanted a 1% better night's sleep. He hired surgeons to teach the riders how to wash their hands so they would get fewer infections. 1% better there too. 1% better pillow. 1% better mattress. Even 1% better interior color for the transport van for the bikes. Because a little bit of dust on a highly tuned bike can degrade its performance. And so if the van is white, you see the dust, you manage the dust better, you have better performing bikes. What was the result of Brailsford's fastidious detail picking 1% improvements? British cycling then in the next years took 60% of the gold medals at the 2008 Olympics. They won the next Tour de France, and over the 5 ensuing years they had 178 world championships, 66 gold medals, and 5 Tour de France victories. All because of 1% improvements. Small marginal improvements. It's little things that sometimes we overlook that can create a scenario, an environment in which a people, a story, a community can thrive. One of the ways that I was introduced to this is a story that was told to me by my mentor, Rabbi Shmuel Golden. The context is about the Eruv. What's the Eruv? The Eruv is a series of poles and wires that will go around the city. And the Eruv that goes around the city is checked every week to make sure that none of the wires fall, none of the poles have come down, nothing's misaligned. And the Eruv came to bubble up in Englewood, New Jersey, in Tenafly, New Jersey, where I was the assistant rabbi learning from Rabbi Golden, because the mayor of Tenafly refused to allow an Eruv to be built in that town. And the fight went all the way to the Supreme Court. Now, why would you take an Eruv fight all the way to the Supreme Court? Probably because little details matter in exactly this way. A person comes to Rabbi Golden and says, Rabbi, do you think God cares if that wire falls down? I mean, yes, God cares if you steal. God may care about adultery. God may care about murder. He may care about the oppression of the poor. He may care about charity. But you think God cares about that wire? Why do you think God cares about that wire? Rabbi Golden said, I don't know if God cares about that wire. But I can tell you to the depth of my soul, I believe God cares that I care about that wire. And let me tell you why it's important to care about that wire. Because that wire allows people who observe Shabbat to do something that they otherwise would be unable to do. To carry anything in the spaces between houses. That means carrying a kugel to a friend on Shabbat, bringing a challah to someone, bringing a bottle of wine when you come for a meal, pushing children in a carriage, carrying a pair of nice shoes to synagogue. All of these things are afforded by an Eruv. If you don't have an Eruv, then people won't be able to do that. And so people naturally select homes that are within this boundary. The moment you say, you know what, I don't really care about that wire, it doesn't matter to me, it doesn't matter to God, it shouldn't matter to me, then this is what happens. You stop caring about whether or not the wire is connected, then you stop caring about whether the wire exists at all. Then, what's the point of going through the effort of constructing an Eruv? And by the end of the operation, you don't have an Eruv anymore. If you don't have an Eruv anymore, then there is no longer a boundary that members of the community, observant members of the community say, you know what, I've got to live inside of that. And then the neighborhood is destroyed. The mayor of Tenafly knew this, and she was afraid that there would be a flock of Orthodox Jews coming to her city that would undermine public schools. A debate for another day whether that would be good or bad for Tenafly, New Jersey. But she knew that an Eruv spells community. And the lack of an Eruv means that community evaporates. The most significant predictor of Jewish continuity is not Jewish education. It's not the Hebrew reading skills, identification with Israel. The single greatest predictor of Jewish continuity is postal code. What neighborhood you live in is the greatest predictor. Jews are social creatures. And without that Eruv, it becomes another impediment to creating neighborhoods that thrive and feed off each other, reinforce each other, that allow people to be kind to one another, to be able to reach out, especially in times like this, where their gathering points are specifically what we need to avoid. Neighborhoods, to a certain extent, are the answer to not having synagogue gathering points. So small things matter. There are little details. Give you another example. The most charitable state in the United States is not California, which has the 6th largest economy. It is not New York, it is not Texas, it's not where Wall Street is, it's not where big oil is. The most charitable state, the most charity that is given in the United States is given in the state of Utah, which is 31st in GDP. Why? I wish it was because there were lots of Hasidim there who were giving charity. But, alas, it is the Mormons. The Mormons who took the concept of tithing, of ma'aser, which is a central concept in the Torah, central concept that Moses gives to those people on that side of the Jordan, and they say, you know what, I take my post-tax income, and to the penny, I'm going to make sure that 10% of it goes to charity. And That's how you translate into a powerful effect of being the most charitable state in the United States while having at the same time GDP near the bottom. There's a rabbi who many in my generation learned from, Rabbi Norman Lamb, former president of Yeshiva University. And Rabbi Lamb said something very interesting. He understood that there's a lot of tension in Judaism between the spirit, the warmkeit, the warm feeling, and the stricture of the law. And sometimes those two come into conflict. Rabbi Lamb said something I think that was very powerful. He said, without the sweeping spirit, the law would be a corpse. But without the law, the spirit would be a ghost. If we don't have those little details, those strictures of law, those minutiae, those 4 cubits of Jewish law, our Judaism threatens to become a ghost, something that is really just a figment of the imagination and not the concrete, deeply woven, deeply connected community. I worry a lot about where we're going to be on the other side of this pandemic. I worry even where we're going to be during this pandemic. The first few weeks were fabulous. There were phone calls, and there were deliveries of food, and there were Zoom conversations, and people came together in all sorts of new places, on all sorts of new platforms, in all sorts of new ways. But we're now in the marathon section of this. We're going the distance. And the only way that I think we can make it through is by finding those little pieces, those daily and weekly rituals that will ensure that we stay connected. It means, in the same way that Judaism ritualizes the fact that you need to say Shema twice a day, that you need to have so many prayers a day, you need to make a bracha before your food, there has to be in your day a time when you say, who am I going to call? Who am I going to reach out to? You need to have at least one daily connection to somebody who is living on their own, someone who is withering without the fulsome social connections that they once had. Weekly, make sure that you share some of your food with someone else. I can tell you now that there are people who don't know how to cook for themselves and could use a little bit of your skills. I can tell you as well that the food bank is desperate for donations. Project Isaiah is coming up, and you should make that part of your weekly ritual, sending food to someone. I want to tell you just one story about something that happens in our congregation. Every morning, at 7:30 a.m., in place of what used to be Kaddish, we have a learning session, a Torah study session, which we deem to be as powerful as the recitation of Kaddish. And I have a dedicated group that logs on. And there was one woman who was very frequent at synagogue, but she unfortunately is in a risk category, cannot come, but she also could not figure out the technology. She could not get on Zoom, not through the data side, not through the phone side. She just couldn't get on. And so there's one person who logs on to our class every morning and calls this woman and relays them to the call, cell phone on speaker, logged into Zoom with the computer. And this woman is now rejoining the community. It's a woman who was involved in the shul, but through the pandemic had started to become more and more isolated, more and more depressed, more and more deteriorated. And this opportunity, it reconnects her to a whole world. It's not a Nobel Prize. Probably isn't another 5 minutes of extra work on a daily basis. But it makes a world of difference. I share this story because I want you to see how a small little action can change someone's entire experience for months upon months. I want to share with you one other Yiddish term. It's called Icekazumt. Icekazumt means that I'm completely, utterly, disgustingly fed up with Zoom. And after the first couple weeks, I can appreciate, I feel that myself. But right now, in many ways, that is our only way to connect. And I have to implore you, you need to have at least one weekly space where you connect to this community. It could be a Torah class, it could be a shiur, it could be a Hebrew-speaking conversation class, it could be a Jewish family service meeting, it could be some kind of board affiliation. I don't care what it is, but you need something regular. There was a single moment in a wet market in China. A virus replicated itself in that wet market. And then billions and billions and billions of times over, it has replicated itself. It has now infected millions of people. It has changed the way every citizen on this planet acted. It's 1 second, one encounter. We are not going to be so fortunate as to be able to flip a switch back. The changes that have taken place over the past 6 months represent a major challenge. And in my mind, the only way we are going to get through this challenge, the only way we're going to persevere, is with these small commitments, with these 1%, these little strictures that we put into our lives, the things that we promise ourselves we are going to do day in and day out. I'm asking you to be part of the solution. I'm asking you to commit to that 1%, to be part of the stitching that holds together the fabric of this community. Every other challenge that the Jewish community has ever felt, experienced, whether it was from the founding of the State of Israel to the exile, has been coming together. Bring the community together, everything else is solved. We have to come together differently now. And it's going to take little actions, little gestures, little stitches. But it is critically important, and I need you to do your part. May everyone be sealed in the book of life, a k'tiva v'chatima tova, to each and every one of you.